Okay, well, I'm going to get us started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Maggie Alexander, and I'm a NEED Global board member, as well as the senior partner at the Philanthropic Initiative. TPI is the nonprofit consulting group with a mission to help donors be more effective with their giving. And as many of you on this call know, NEED is a network of engaged international donors, a peer-to-peer donor network focused on international philanthropy. I'm so excited today to kick off this learning series with Sasha Chanoff, a year-long journey of really focusing on the most important issues affecting refugees. Today, there are some 108 million forcibly displaced people worldwide and 35 million refugees. I'm always struck by the figure that the average length of time before a refugee can return home is 20 years. Today, we're going to focus on how we support, how we can sponsor and support refugees coming here to the United States. And we've got a lot to cover in just 1 hour, so I'm going to briefly introduce our speakers. My co-host, Sasha Chanoff, founded Refuge Point in 2005 to help refugees access long-term solutions for resettlement and self-reliance. Jacob Malib and Akwat Leek, who are going to share a little bit about their journey, their personal journey as refugees from South Sudan. Ed Shapiro, the founder of the Shapiro Foundation, who's devoted his life to creating community-based resettlement opportunities for displaced people. And I want to give a special shout out for Ed to join us during his vacation. So thank you, Ed, for that. And last but not least is Annie Nolte Henning, the executive director of the Community Sponsor Hub, helping communities to protect, resettle, and integrate refugees here in the U.S. as part of the Welcome Corp sponsorship program. We're really grateful, Annie, for you taking time away from your maternity leave to be with us today. Logistically, I saw already a question in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat and trying to keep track of all the questions. We have a pretty packed agenda today, so if we're not able to reply to all of your questions in the chat, we will follow up via email. And with that, I'm delighted to turn it over to Sasha Chanoff.
Thanks, Maggie, and welcome, everybody. This is a series that we are starting in collaboration with Network of Engaged International Donors and the Philanthropic Initiative, as Maggie said, a learning journey about refugees and the refugee space. Maggie, thanks for giving some of those high-level kind of points as an overview. I wanted to add to what you said by highlighting that when you say the average amount of time before someone goes home is about 20 years, there are actually a few different kinds of solutions for refugees. That is, those people who fled from their home country into a neighboring country or somewhere else. And those solutions are to return home. And that's, of course, what everybody wants. Another solution is for people to legally integrate into the country to which they've fled. But that's often not really possible. Most refugees don't have adequate rights in the countries to which they've fled to lead normal lives. The biggest refugee hosting country today is Turkey, with about 3.5 million refugees. But across the world, there are many countries that are hosting refugees, often very generously, but they still don't give them the rights that they need to lead normal lives. And a third solution is resettlement, which is a legal process to identify people from overseas and bring them to countries like the US and about 30 others around the world, where they have a pathway to normalcy and citizenship and have all the rights that they need to live normally. So today we're going to focus on the US Refugee Resettlement Program and a new dimension of that program that started a year ago called the Welcome Corps. And I'm thrilled to have this discussion. Again, it's the first in a learning journey series for philanthropists that we want to lead to bring people into these issues, to explore how philanthropists can engage both from a volunteer as well as a philanthropic perspective. And we're thrilled to be able to have the people we have on the call today, and a special thanks to Akwat and Jacob. And with that, I want to turn it over to Akwat and Jacob and bring you into the conversation. I'll note also that that Akwat, actually, you spoke for a NEED event a number of years ago, when I think we held it at Beth Floor's house in Boston. And I recall that event well because you were such a hit. Everybody really appreciated what you said. But Akwat, perhaps you could just start by telling us like who you are, how did you get to the US? And you're from South Sudan originally, but when did you leave?
All right. Well, thank you, Sacha, and hello, everybody. My name is Akwat. If you can't hear me well, I do apologize for that. I'm just kind of recovering from a call. But I'll try to be clear as much as I can. So I am, of course, from South Sudan. That's my original country. I left South Sudan when I was only 4 years and fled to Uganda by foot with my family. So I lived there for about 10 years in a refugee camp in Uganda. My brother was one of the Lost Boys. And so before we could even learn about him, we stayed in a refugee camp for about 10 years. We didn't know whether he was alive. We didn't know where he was. And luckily, we found out on a phone call that he was alive and was in the United States. After he learned about us being alive as well, he really wanted to make sure that for my mom, at least one of the family member, for him to believe that somebody was still alive in his family. So at the time, I was only 14. So my mom was the one that was supposed to come to US, but she couldn't leave me behind because I was a teen. So that's how I was fortunate to make my way up to United States in 2004. So I came to this country on February 18th. So it's gonna be 21, I believe, the 20 or 20 years in February.
Yeah, 20 years.
20 years.
Oh my.
Yes, yeah. So my anniversary, 20 years in the United States is coming up. So yeah, so came as a refugee, 14 years, a lot of snow on the ground at the time. It was in Syracuse, New York. That's where we were resettled.
Wow. Akwat, let me just jump in. I want to
Yes.
fill in a couple of things that you just said, because I'm not sure that everybody here on the call knows who the Lost Boys and Girls are. So I just want to share very briefly that that your brother, John Dow, who's a friend and whom I know, was one of a group known as the Lost Boys and Girls. And this is the group that the US government identified as part of the US's efforts to bring refugees here to the US through our resettlement program. That program has actually been going on since 1980 and has brought in about 3.5 million refugees. But part of that program is identifying specific groups of people that are in need of resettlement collectively. The Lost Boys and Girls is a group from South Sudan who are separated from their parents at a very young age and had what some consider like just a true exodus, kind of biblical proportions from South Sudan, walking to Ethiopia, then being chased out of Ethiopia back to South Sudan and down to Kenya, where they lived, raising each other on their own as young children and then young adults. And Akwat, your brother was part of that group. When they came to the US, there was a lot of media around them, 60 Minutes, even a Hollywood story about them. So your brother arrived here and then he was able to send for your mom, because as a refugee here, you can send for your parents, your spouse, and your children. I just wanted to interject that. So you came, it's going to be 20 years, and then what happened?
Yeah, so we had some nice Samaritan that offered to help us out, especially the church, Presbyterian. They resettle us. They provide us with everything that we need, like basic stuff. And I enrolled in high school with, nothing. I did not really speak English at the time. I had to remember the struggle that I had at a very young age. And so my focus was really education. So graduated high school in 2007 and went to college for 4 years. So I studied international studies with a focus in humanitarian. I think that was inspired by the experience that I went through. I didn't want to see any other child being robbed of their childhood like I was. And I did minor in sociology. And the year I graduated, 2011, that's when I got married to Jacob.
Wow. Thank you. And thank you for highlighting why you studied. And those are very powerful words, that you didn't want to see other children robbed of their childhoods. And we do know that when people flee their homes to a neighboring country and they're refugees for so long, that actually happens to so many people. They have a lack of education, a lack of opportunity in the best circumstances, but often, and girls in particular, are in serious danger for a variety of reasons. Is that right? Is that what you've seen?
Absolutely. Pretty
Yeah.
much.
Thanks, Akwat. So this guy next to you, you met and got married in 2011?
Yes. So, so Jacob and I met in a wedding. So was in 2005. It was his cousin wedding. He was one of the groommaid, and I was one of the bridesmaid, and that's how we kind of officially met. And follow up from there. So dated for 5 years, 7 years.
5 years, 7 years.
So he was a sophomore at the time when we met in college, and I was still in high school. So he made a commitment to wait for me to finish my education, which is very rare in my culture. So girl education is not that valued, but for him to wait it patiently, that was a bonus for him.
Wow. Wow. Okay. I've seen that too, that girls' education is not valued at all. In fact, in Kakuma camp, where Jacob, you were, when you go into a high school, you see that there's about 95% boys and about 5% girls, because girls' education is not valued. So Jacob, you met Akwat, you were a sophomore. Where were you studying?
So I was studying at UNH. So I enrolled in 2003 at UNH. And 2005, that's when I met her. So my cousin called me and told me that I wanted to be my roommate. And, I know a girl that maybe you would be interested. So, and he mentioned her. So I was like, okay, this will encourage me to come, because I didn't want to go. I didn't want to go. So we went there and I met her, I like her. So I asked her, contact number, and we started dating right away in college.
Wow.
And I told her that I want to, pull you away from your education. So I don't mind to wait that long. So I can wait until you graduate. I graduated 2006 and she started 2007. So that I was like, okay, seeing you go to college, I will start working, save some money, so that when you finish, we start our family. And that's what I did.
Amazing. So Jacob, you and I met when I was working in Kakuma, helping to resettle the group known as the Lost Boys. You're one of them. And you came here to the US, you went to University of New Hampshire, you met Akwat, found love, got married. But at some point, and you were separated from your family as well, just as Akwat's brother John was separated from his family. At some point, your mom showed up in Kakuma, right? When was that?
That was 2012.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned that my mother is alive, and she was taking care of my nieces. They were little young, and my sister was in an abusive relationship, and she just disappeared. And then her husband could not manage to take care of the little babies, so he gave them to my mother. And then to that, he died. He passed away. So my mother became a legal caretaker. So, and then I asked her, I talked to her on the phone, and I told her that I'll bring you to the refugee camp, and then so that I can support you. Back in the village, I cannot support you. So she came to Kakuma refugee camp, and I support her. And I wanted to bring her to the United States. Everyone can bring her to your mom, like John Dow did to his mom. So I want to bring her, but I know that she will not able to make it with the grandkid. So my wife and I start discussing with her, and pointed out that we want to bring you here, and she accept that with the exception that if she will come with them, then she will come. Otherwise, she will not come. And my mother by then was ill, you know, so she was sick. So, and I was worried that, you know, if she passed away, and then who will take care of the kid? So I was in the situation that, you know, what should I do? She don't want to come because she don't want to leave the kid, but I want her to come here so that she can, you know, she can be treated. So I talked to her. We, you know, I caught up to her. Finally, we told her that, you know, if they don't make it here, we'll find a way. We'll bring them, but you will come. We want you first, you know, because by the law, you're not allowed unless if they are your kids, you know, biological kids, but they're not your biological. They are your grandkids.
Yeah, so Jake, sorry, let me just clarify that too, although I think it's quite clear that as a refugee who arrived here in the US, you had the right to send for your mom. Refugees, again, have the right to send for their parents, their spouse, and their unmarried children under 21. Your mom had 3 of her grandchildren, 3 girls who are your nieces, whom she had been raising since they were little children.
Right. Yeah.
1, 2, 3 years old, and
Yeah,
she had
toddler, yeah.
So this point where she did not want to leave them, that is totally rational and normal, because Kakuma is not a safe place for girls, and yet she was sick. You wanted her to come here, so she finally made the decision to come.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna jump in. Yeah, so she finally was not like she made a decision to come, but we had have a session of discussion with her so many times to convince her. But we also saw her point. But again, we have to go with the rule. So we convinced her under one circumstance. We told her that if she agreed to come, and then we could, you know, possibly find a boarding school for this girl somewhere in Uganda or somewhere in Kenya where they could be safe. So that was the only reason that she agreed. But as we continue to, you know, to do the process, she kept bringing them. She kept bringing them to Nairobi at the time, thinking that these people can see that she have no one to leave this girl behind with. But that was unfortunate. Even at the very last days that she flew out of Nairobi, she still brought them. So that didn't work. But then when she came, you know, when she finally came, it was during COVID. So it was just a lot of isolation. And then she couldn't thinking about the girl that she left behind. So it was a struggle for some time. She kind of had a depression because of that.
Thank you. Let me pause there, because I do want to move on to our next speaker, but I want to just emphasize the challenge and how tragic it was that she had to leave them behind. I also want to bring up the photo of your family, because it's such a beautiful photo that you shared the other day. So I want to just put it here so people can get a sense of both you and your family. I don't know if people can see that, or if there's a way to make it bigger for a moment, but this is Akwat. Who are the people here?
So that's me, my husband, and then my mother-in-law. She's the one next to her son, and then my 3 children, and one of the unborn baby. I was pregnant at the time.
Thank you.
She's now 2.
How are they?
Thank you for sharing that. So I want to leave your story at this place where you're all in the US and you desperately want to bring Jacob, your nieces, your mother's grandchildren to the US. And I want to move on to Ed Shapiro, who is calling in from afar. Ed, are you here with us?
You know, Sasha, I saw that Ed had
Can
joined.
you hear me now?
Oh, there we go.
Great.
He's on his cell
Sorry,
phone.
I had to switch to phone. I was losing the video connection frequently. So hopefully you can hear me all okay. I'm sorry you won't be able to see me, and I saw you all briefly until I switched to phone. But can you hear me all okay?
We can, and we're going to put a photo of you up so we can look at a photo of you.
Good. And that was from when I was a bit younger, so that's good for everyone to have that image.
And Ed, thanks for joining us from your vacation. You know, when I thought about the philanthropic angle here, there's really nobody in the country who has done more, who is engaged more, who's been more committed to sponsorship here in the US and around the world than you. So even though you were on vacation and needed to call in from a phone, I thought we have to have you on the phone. So thanks for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm here in Mexico City. Never been, and it's an amazing city, and I'm more than happy to take an hour out of my day to share my perspective on sponsorship and Welcome Corps. It's been an incredible part of my life for the last 8 years or so. So really appreciate the interest, and Sasha, appreciate you putting this all together. So I'll just spend a few minutes kind of telling you a little bit about my story and path here, and how and why I feel so strongly about the opportunity around sponsorship. So this all started for me in 2015. I was in the investment business, where I'd been working for 26 years at that point, and started spending a little bit of time thinking about our charitable foundation that my wife and I had founded in 2000, where we wanted to focus, what areas. Refugees were one of a number of areas that I had interest in. You may remember in 2015, there was significant publicity around the Syrian refugee crisis at the time. The Syrian civil war had produced ultimately over 5 million refugees who had fled the country, and so there was a lot of focus on that. I did a trip to Jordan and to Lesbos, kind of two of the places that were receiving very large numbers. A camp called Zatri in Jordan that went from nothing to housing 80,000 Syrians, and then went to the island of Lesbos in Greece and Athens, and saw what was happening with the flows up through Europe. I came back from that trip that I made in 2016 with some frustration that the United States under President Obama had not joined much of the rest of the world in playing some role in resettling Syrian refugees, allowing them to come to the United States. And then some of you may remember there was an event, an image where a little boy, Alan Kurdi, a Syrian boy, washed up tragically on the shores of Turkey, and that image changed the world, literally in a matter of days. Country after country decided to expand or open new resettlement pathways, outcry from their citizens, and President Obama announced at that point that the United States would in fact resettle 10,000 Syrian refugees in that current year, in 2016. That opened up an opportunity for me to learn about resettlement, understand what that might mean, what kind of opportunities there might be for ordinary citizens. Up until the announcement of Welcome Corps, which we'll talk more about, there hasn't ever been in the 45 years since the Refugee Act was signed, for ordinary Americans to be really involved. But there were some sort of niche opportunities called co-sponsorship that I dove in, learned about, ended up partnering with a number of organizations, our synagogue, a resettlement agency, local resettlement agency outside of Boston called Jewish Family Service of Metro West, and their national partner and our partner Highest, to put together a plan that was submitted. Again, I knew very, very little about this world. I was still working full time, but I was supportive of the idea. We put together a letter. We sent it off to Highest, who forwarded it to the State Department, and then a few months later, we got a letter back and said, "Congratulations, we're going to send you 60 Syrians. Get ready." And it was kind of life-changing in a number of ways. Kind of mind-blowing for me. Not again really knowing much about this, but having a genuine interest and having partners who did know a lot about this, that I appreciated the interest, and I had a bet I was willing to make that basically has shaped so much of our work, which is that ordinary citizens in every country in the world, that regardless of their leaders, their political views, there's at least some percentage, some cases significant percentage of ordinary citizens who, if given the opportunity by their governments, would play a role, would want to play a role, the life-changing role of supporting, sponsoring refugees. And so I got to dive in on this. It created for me kind of two decisions, or helped me make two decisions. One, that I wanted to focus my foundation, our philanthropic work, exclusively on refugees and refugee resettlement and sponsorship. And shortly after that, made a second decision that, in fact, was so inspired by this that I wanted to retire from my investment management career and do this full time and do this work and do it globally.
Ed,
What I
can
hadn't counted on.
can I jump in for a sec?
Yes. Sure.
I just want to highlight one thing that you said, which struck me particularly, which is that, and I see this at Network of Engaged International Donors too, and in the philanthropy space, which is that philanthropists who have a vision and see things that feel that should be accomplished in the world can both do those things. For you, it's both like action and funding and bringing partnerships together, but that actually can help to inspire government and other action. And the role of the philanthropy role is so important, because I think sometimes without that, you wouldn't have change in the world. And I think the efforts that you took to sponsor those Syrian refugees, and this photo that we have here of you welcoming a Syrian boy at the airport in Boston, there was a great Boston Globe article or series of articles about you and your family, Barbara, doing that. That actually led to broader change. You influenced organizations to do that. And I would dare say you are a piece of why the US is moving forward with the Welcome Corps.
Well, thank you, Sasha. I appreciate that. Certainly, I guess I would flip it around a bit and say, I had ideas and I had a desire to put capital and time to work here, but I did come into this as really ignorant. And even though I've spent now close to 8 years working in this field, I couldn't do any of this work without really two critical other players in the infrastructure. One is that the nonprofits and organizations like Refuge Point, Sasha's organization, where I engaged and brought ideas and in some cases funding to be able to do the kind of work that I wanted to do. I had the ideas, but we're not an operator, we're not an NGO. And so I needed those critical partners. And what I'd be maybe most proud of doing over the last 8 years is being able to find incredible leaders at organizations that are doing either exactly what I want to do or related work that we can bring into this field. And the other critical part, and I learned the hard way for 4 years of operating under an administration that was not supportive of refugee resettlement and immigration generally in the United States. And so I had to pivot. I had to make a decision relatively quickly. I thought that I make a huge mistake in making this big bet and want to do that, working under the sort of implicit assumption that governments who had been doing this for many years, administrations, would be supportive. And when it was clear to me after the election of 2016 that wasn't going to be possible, had to make this decision, and that was basically to look outside the United States. Both my wife and I have had, from the beginning of our foundation, probably a disproportionate focus on international, having traveled the world and seeing the kind of needs in developing countries, said, I want to focus on that, and let's find other places. And that led to us really doing the majority of our work in Canada for the next 4 years. Some of you may know Canada is a leader, has been doing private sponsorship for 45 years now. And I'd heard about that when we started doing this work in late 2016. And I had an opportunity to learn from and work with a very progressive and open government administration in Canada and a number of great NGOs to be able to not only learn and be able to at some point replicate that in other countries, including the United States, but actually do some really important work. And one of my proudest projects is working with Sasha and Refuge Point and partners in Canada to be able to create a brand new pathway for labor-based pathway where there were skilled refugees that could be matched with employers across Canada and bring them in there. And it was another opportunity. I've been focused on win-win, what's great for and needed for the refugees and what's so appreciated by the sponsors themselves. I've seen the impact, as you mentioned. My own family's been very involved in the Syrian family that our synagogue sponsored. My wife's been in the delivery room twice now for the new Americans that they brought. But what labor added
I wanted
to this. Sorry.
No, let me jump in because we're coming to the end of this portion where I wanted to talk to you, but you have been a champion for the Global Refugee Sponsorship Initiative, which is in enabling sponsorship in countries around the world. You've been a champion for what's happening in Canada, and you're a champion for what's happening in the US. For 30 seconds, do you have, and by the way, I love hearing the story about Barbara, your wife, in the delivery room with the Syrian family. It shows the close ties that you create with the families that you're helping. In 30 seconds, do you have any advice for philanthropists listening in here about how they might engage in a way that is really meaningful for them?
Yeah, I would say in two ways. Those that are able and willing, we now have, thanks to the launch of Welcome Corps, an opportunity for every American, any American, to be part of a group, of a welcoming group, of essentially any refugee in the world. That's something Canada's had, and the U.S. now for the first time has, and that's been live now for just a month. And so that's a really important opportunity. We can share information about how you can learn more about the Welcome Corps. And for those that don't have the immediate time, different stages of their life, but want to be supportive, we've seen this everywhere. This is an expensive endeavor, and what we're trying to do is make this available to any American, regardless of their income. And so we've raised a fund that NEED has been helpful in supporting the sponsor fund, so that we can be able to make funds available to those sponsor groups who have all the other willingness and time, but not the money to do that. So I think both the time and or the money are going to be really important, and I'm determined to make 2024 a really successful launch, and people will look back, I think, the way they do in Canada and say this was the first year of what's become a structural, really important change to U.S. resettlement.
Thank you, Ed. We are at a really transformative moment, I would say, in the history of the world in terms of forced migration and U.S. policy, among other things. And I think the things that we can and should and must do today can have enduring long-term consequences. Sarah, thank you for that comment about Ed. I appreciate it. Others, you're welcome to comment in the comment section here. Nasrat, thanks for your comment as well about Ed, and others. Please feel free to comment. So now I want to learn more about what the Welcome Corps is. And for that, I'd like to bring in Annie Nolte, the Executive Director of the Community Sponsorship Hub. So Annie, welcome. It is great to see you 3 days off of maternity leave, although I know somehow you are working during maternity leave too. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being back. Thank you for doing all that you do. Tell us about the Welcome Corps and the Community Sponsorship Hub.
Yeah, thank you, Sasha, and Maggie, thanks to you too. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really grateful to be here today. It feels really nice to be back and have a little break from baby number 2. And I appreciate NEED and Philanthropic Initiative and Refuge Point for organizing this event for us. So yes, I'd like to talk a little bit about what the Welcome Corps is. At the highest level, it's a new U.S. Department of State program that empowers everyday people to be able to welcome refugees as they rebuild their futures. So we just got to hear a little bit about how Ed has done that. And I really enjoy Jacob and Akwat's story as well, especially the love story attached to it. I'm always in for a good love story. So I have the privilege of leading the Community Sponsorship Hub, and we exist to make it easier for communities to welcome refugees. And our role as the hub, like our organization name says, it allows us to work with both existing institutions like your federal and your local governments, but then also new actors like refugee leaders and businesses and universities and philanthropists that are really committed to building more welcoming communities. And because the Welcome Corps is such an ambitious initiative, we have an operating consortium of nonprofits that Community Sponsorship Hub leads, but also consists of other outstanding partner organizations. You'll see all of the names here on the slide. Each one has their own expertise in refugee resettlement and welcoming, and so we're all in this together to really launch this program. So I'm gonna back up just a little bit and tell you the why behind why Welcome Corps exists, because resettlement in the traditional sense and welcoming has been happening for decades, and before 1980, much welcoming was already happening by small groups all over the country without any kind of government assistance, and often in churches and synagogues and mosques. And then in 1980, the Refugee Act established what we know today as the U.S. Refugee Admissions Program. And so while the U.S. we've never been able to resettle at the pace to keep up with the global need, right? But the U.S. resettlement system has always welcomed tens of thousands of refugees each year. In 2016, the U.S. resettlement system was nearly decimated during the previous administration, where funding was slashed, the structure was totally crumbled, and in fact, in 2020, the annual goal was set at just 15,000 refugees being allowed to be resettled, which is the lowest in American history. So when President Biden took office and reaffirmed our country's strong commitment to refugee resettlement, setting a goal of resettling 125,000 refugees annually, it felt very ambitious. And given that it was set against this background of a resettlement structure that had overextended staff and underfunded organizations, a very committed group of thought leaders, including our friend Ed Shapiro here, really knew that we had to add and complement the system that was already quite strained. And so that, of course, now involves both the public and private partners that really allow everyone to play a role in resettlement through what at the Welcome Corps we call sponsor groups. So the Welcome Corps helps to form groups that provide the financial, the emotional, and practical support for newcomers. And these groups commit to providing the core resettlement services similar to those that resettlement agencies have typically provided for a minimum of 90 days. And these are things like helping find housing and helping furnish housing, helping prepare for job interviews, getting kids signed up for school, and making sure that people have access to medical care. But beyond these basics that seem to just feel natural to us, sponsorship allows newcomers to immediately access social capital. And that's something that I've realized I take for granted. I can't remember the time in my life where all of a sudden I had a network of family and friends and neighbors and teachers and people around me that were able to support me if my car broke down or I had a question about, about a doctor. But often refugees come here and don't have that. It might take a few weeks to meet a neighbor, and they might have a caseworker, but they might not know anyone in their community. And so through sponsor groups, you automatically and immediately have 5 people in that sponsor group who not only know the ropes in the community, but each have their own extensive networks that help a newcomer assimilate in a much more meaningful way. And so sponsors do a lot of work to prepare. They complete training, they raise money, and they make a plan on how to connect with services and resources. And so through Welcome Corps, you can sponsor in 2 different ways. The first is groups can be matched with a refugee family they don't know who is already in the process of resettling in the United States. The second is that groups can apply to sponsor a refugee or family they already know. And this is the first time in U.S. history that people can name a person that they would like to help resettle. And so we're really excited about that. And tomorrow's the first anniversary of the launch of the Welcome Corps last year on January 19th. And so I'm excited to share a little sneak peek of some of the impact we've seen in the first year. As of today, more than 15,000 sponsors have stepped up to sponsor refugees through the Welcome Corps, and the first refugees were welcomed last June. And I will just say I'm in Minnesota still. I will always have bragging rights that the first 2 groups were in Minnesota, and private sponsor groups have now formed in more than 45 states. Minnesota, DC, Illinois, Washington are some of those states that lead the pack. But we're also excited to see groups showing up in Alabama, South Dakota, Idaho. They're doing the work of welcoming too. And there's just been this huge and true paradigm shift with Welcome Corps. And because we're at this moment now where we can reimagine the US's approach to refugee resettlement by engaging Americans in the experience, we have an opportunity to bring in as many people as possible. And And we've seen the government invest in refugee resettlement in new and exciting ways. But there is a lot that philanthropy can do to ensure that welcoming is adequately funded. And so a little bit of what Ed shared, there are ways that we really can stand this program up that protects it in a vulnerable election year and to future administrations. And something that we focus on at Community Sponsorship Hub is really ensuring that there are strong systems in place, but that also the infrastructure allows Welcome Corps to live and grow at the grassroots level. Traditionally, the demographic for sponsor groups are white retirees at a higher socioeconomic level. But we know that in order for this program and for this legacy to really take root, that there has to be better access to allow all communities to be involved in the process. So we help with that in two different ways. First, we equip organizations with financial and technical support to stand up their own sponsorship programs in whatever way that looks like in their own community. So just 4 years ago, there were less than 50 organizations across the US that had some type of community engagement or sponsorship program. And through our work with both national and local partners and through what we call the Catalyst Fund, CSH has now seen has now been able to more than triple the number of organizations that create opportunities and support sponsor groups. And then the second way is we recognize that while thousands of people want to meaningfully welcome newcomers in their community, they may lack the financial support to do so. So I've talked to college students that are all about standing in line in the cold Minnesota winters to help people get their Social Security number and get set up on benefits. But they're college kids. They don't have the access to the financial resources to be able to support. We've seen a lot of formerly resettled refugees who come and say, I want to give back. I would like to also sponsor someone and be matched with someone to be able to offer them the same kind of experience, but don't have the financial resources to do so. So through what we call the Sponsor Fund, we help sponsors overcome those barriers so that they can do that real high touch and frontline work of welcoming and not have to worry about the financial obstacles. So that's one way that I think Ed was alluding to that philanthropy can really support.
Annie, I wanted to just summarize a couple of things that you said. One, sponsorship is available and will help to bring more refugees here. And people can do it even if they don't know someone, or just like Jacob Anaquat, they can do it to reunite with family members that they so desperately want to see and be with and support. So that's one thing, it helps refugees. But you said a couple of other things that struck me as really important. The second one is that communities across the country, you said in 45 states, are sponsoring. And this is an election year. And what I know too, because I've been part of this, is I've seen Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives across the spectrum are all engaged in this. And I think that is such an incredibly important message to send right now today, as immigration is at the crux of a lot of the political debate, and it's such a tangled issue. And at the same time, you highlighted, and Ed highlighted, what philanthropists can do, either by volunteering. You highlighted the Sponsor Fund and also the Catalyst Fund, and the distinction is that the Sponsor Fund is supporting groups that have a financial barrier because you have to raise almost $2,400 or about $2,400 per person you're sponsoring. That means Jacob Anaquat, if they're sponsoring their 3 nieces, have to raise 24 times 3, your math is better than mine. But while they might have that, others might not. So the Sponsor Fund can do that. And you said the Catalyst Fund helps to support groups, NGOs, that are playing a role to support the groups like Jacob's or others that are bringing people in. This is such a critically important thing to do. So is there anything else you wanted to share with us about that? I do want to go to some kind of audience participation and get a few comments from other people, but I just wanted to hear if you had any last words there. And I love this photo of a group sponsoring people at the airport.
Yeah, I think this one might be in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I mean, the slide says it all, right? We're really excited about the positive changes we're seeing, big and small, in urban and rural areas. We're a year in. We're excited about the impact communities are able to make in 2024. And the Welcome Corps is not just a program; it's a vision for the U.S. to be a more welcoming nation. while improving our own communities at the same time. So thanks, Sasha. I would love to hear some discussion on this, and thanks for allowing me to join today, and for all of you who are supporting the reimagine of what it means to welcome. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Right. And Annie, Karen and Sarah asked a question here. Can you explain how these groups collaborate? Do you just want to share really briefly what the Community Sponsorship Hub's role is in relation to these other groups and in relation to the State Department?
Absolutely. And I know there's so many acronyms. So very good question. Welcome Corps is the program. And so the consortium is led by Community Sponsorship Hub, where what I have the privilege to lead, and all of the organizations that are in the consortium are all play a unique role and lead a different function. So I think I have some, there might be some IRIS folks on here today. They lead the application review. Some of my Welcome.us colleagues lead on communications. IRAP really helps with the legal support. And so we all play a critical role, and everyone here has very, very decades and decades worth of experience resettling refugees in different ways.
Right. Thank you, Annie. I want to bring in a few comments from a few people who are on this call as well. And there are two in particular that I'd like to call on first. And the first is Nasra Ismail. Nasra, you're known to many in the philanthropic community as you have worn a philanthropic hat, an NGO leader hat. You are now the executive director of Alight in the US. And are in Minnesota. I don't know if you're in Minnesota right now, but that's where Alight is. And Annie actually was the former executive director, and Minnesota was the first place that welcomed people. So it's great to have you here. I'd love to hear some of your perspective on thoughts briefly about this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sasha. And thank you to NEED and TPI and really everyone, whether you're in your formal hat or as an individual and champion like Ed. Like really just thank you. This is such an urgent issue. And this is the kind of issue that for me, both as a personal story of being someone who's been resettled when I was a young child, but also now living in America and seeing what I can do and what it unleashed in me. This is something that is agnostic to location. Displacement is deeply a personal journey, but it can be it doesn't have to be a lonely one, and it can be one where we're all bound together because people cover a long journey. And it's really unfortunate that at least for the humanitarian sector, we've just focused on people where we found them, but we've got to get them and we've got to address them in a way that's meaningful, like Annie said, about what is life here in the US. It's not just to be dropped off at the airport, there's more than that. So we're, as a collective, nonprofit, we're interested in making sure that it's an end-to-end kind of support and community making. One thing I wanted to say, and a question behind this, and I love anyone who's inspired to answer to do it, is the time we have this year is so short. And the work that has been done from administration to rebuild resettlement period has taken so much time and effort. It would be a failure for us not to ask ourselves, what can we do? Be a sponsor, be a donor, be a champion, ultimately be someone who helps. So I just want to call on all of you, professionally, personally, figure out your role in this and raise your hand. And honestly, we will, through a learning journey, help you become Ed Shapiro if that should be your journey. Or just help enlighten in you that dream to do something for someone and to change your life. This is a transformative journey. As a funder, as a supporter, as a learner, as a sponsor, we have to do something different this year because of the politics at hand. And I really hope that we grab Jacob and the whole family and say, you also can be a sponsor. You may have been sponsored, but you can be a sponsor. And there are communities who are waiting to be accessed, who are waiting to contribute. And they are the grassroots. And Annie, I can't wait to partner with you in that one. So I just wanted to say it's good, but we have to do more. And the urgency is now. Thank you so much, Sasha.
Thank you, Nasra. Wow, I see Jacob and Akwat and others nodding their heads in agreement. And of course, the urgency is for all of us to act, but the urgency is also, just like you highlighted, on the individual level. Jacob and Akwat need to bring their nieces over, Jacob's mom's grandchildren over here desperately, urgently, and right now, because those young women are in danger in Kakuma. So this is like really down to the individual level, as well as a community and as well as a national level too, and the significance of this nationally right now in this election year. I just wanted to really briefly ask if Margaret Dunn is here. You are a member of NEED and a fantastic funder on many different issues of concern and have been personally engaged in welcoming an Afghan family. And if you could just share for 30 seconds or 1 minute, if you are here, Margaret, what that
Yes,
has meant.
hi, I am here. Thank you, Sasha. In the 70s, my family was part of a group of people that sponsored Vietnamese refugees from camps in Hong Kong. And I wanted to do something similar with my children and my family, and was fortunate to find a group of other volunteers, and we sponsored an Afghan family in Massachusetts who had a brother who had been resettled here and didn't know if they'd be able to be resettled near him. And so we stepped up and did that. And it's been the most rewarding, wonderful experience from, helping them get connected to the school system, jobs. I mean, the list goes on. And we were fortunate enough to end up having 20 plus volunteers get engaged and do that work with us.
Wow. Thank you, Margaret, for what you've done and sharing that with all of us. We are sadly coming close to the end of our program here, but I wanted to ask if Ed or Annie or Jacob or Akwat, if any of you wanted to share one other brief thought with us here.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, everybody, for everything that you just said. We were just moved by, I don't want to say her name wrong. Is it Nasra?
Nasra.
Yeah. Okay. So everything that you spoke there, it was in our heart. And thank you for saying that. We have been in those shoes, and the time is now. We can't wait any longer when we have a window to do it. So thank everybody for being here. And you hear a call of action. And it's up to you to pick what you want to pick. So back to our niece's story. So these girls, they're not that young anymore. And we have a culture, when you reach a certain age, you get married off without even you saying your opinion. And that's what worried us really, really, really bad. You heard of my story with Jacob. I had a chance to choose who I want to marry. We don't see that case for these girls. We see them being forced to get married. So last year, Jacob was in South Sudan in a court trying to fight for this girl because somehow that family, they rise up and all of a sudden they want to take them. And what's behind that is the wealth. So these girls are gonna get married off and the family is gonna get that wealth. Not us, but the dad family. So he had to go there to rescue them. So that kind of worried us really every night. Not knowing that Jacob is not there to help them, we're far away. So that is the situation that we want to live with each and every one of you today. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Akwat. And that story is terrifying on behalf of the girls. I feel terrified, and it's also common in the sense that there are so many people overseas who have loved ones here in the US, and those people overseas who are living as refugees are in really dangerous situations. And we can take action to do something about that through the Welcome Corps and through the efforts that are going on. I wanted to now just turn it over briefly to Ina at NEED, but to share just any thoughts about Network of Engaged International Donors Global and this learning journey. Ina, with a minute or so, could you? Yeah, please go.
Really quickly, just we thought it was important to start a second learning circle journey on this issue, not just because what's politically going on, but because this is an urgent issue. And there's a shift, as Sasha pointed out, where people can identify who they want to bring and who they want to sponsor. And there's a need to help support that process because not everybody has the funds to bring others or their relatives to the United States. And so this learning journey is designed to both give donors within our network, but also beyond, some information about how to get involved. And I believe we have sessions scheduled for May 13th and September 16th. So we're going to spread them across the year and sort of continue to give you information as this evolves. And I hope all of you will get involved.
Thank you, Ina. And Maggie, I want to turn it over to you for a moment to share any thoughts, and then I'll share a few final closing words.
Well, I just really want to thank you, Sasha, for really bringing what an incredible conversation, and thank Nazra for your call to action. I see in the chat that people are asking, how can we get engaged? How can we take that step to action? And so we will be following up this conversation with an email out to all of you. I see that Annie, you put the welcomecorps.org in the chat. Thank you for that. So people can go to the website. If you're looking for sponsors, there's a great platform on the Welcome Corps website where you can both say you want to sponsor, but you can also look for sponsors. And thanks to Ed and to Annie and to Jacob and Akwat. Thank you for sharing your stories and your journeys. I'm really inspired by this, and I'm looking forward with Sasha to thanks for Sasha's expertise. We'll be designing the next 2 sessions to really tackle the most critical and important issues that are facing refugees today. So I thank you for that, and I'll turn it to you, Sasha, for the final word.
Thanks, Maggie. I wanted to highlight a few action steps. First, that there is going to be a Welcome Corps in-person event at the Boston Library on January 25th, next week. Could somebody please put that in the chat, and we can share that out as well. If you are in Boston, Annie will be here, Ed will be here, the Assistant Deputy Secretary of State, Sarah Cross, will also be here talking about the Welcome Corps, and that will start a tour across the US of the Welcome Corps. So you can engage in that, as well as volunteering to do this, as well as donating in the ways that we have highlighted here. Thank you for being here. As Akwat just pointed out, there is a real extreme moral urgency to act right now, and those actions will impact in such positive and even life-saving ways the lives of Jacob's nieces, who are waiting to join him here, and he's formed a group to do that with Akwat and his mom and others. There is urgency to act because this is personally so satisfying, but across the country, we see communities that want to act. And again, this transcends politics. It transcends liberal versus conservative or Republican versus Democrat. And in that sense, it lends a unifying measure or point around in a country right now that is terribly disunified. This is something that we have seen unites people together in a common purpose, and that's so badly needed. And we have also seen that when the US can lead on things, other countries can follow as well. So if we are successful here, that can help to, in ways, repair some of the terrible damage that has been done in our country when we all feel so disunified. We can bring people together through this. It can help to heal our nation, and it can also help to heal the world. And with so many people forcibly displaced, we need more healing in this world. We need more people to take action so that we can address the needs of those who are forcibly displaced, find homes for them, and in that they can help us to rebuild our communities in such positive ways. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for joining this learning journey. We will continue to follow up, and we hope many of you will join us on the next one and in this learning series this year. Have a wonderful day.